guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome to another installment of Must Know Standards. This time we're going to cover the tune All of Me and we're going to look specifically at a few different ways to make it through the chord progression. We're going to focus most of our attention on the chord changes and look at a couple of ways to play through them, from basic options and three-note voicings to more advanced movements and substitutions. But we'll also learn the head along the way, and who knows, maybe the looper will come in useful for that. As always, the lesson materials will be super deep on this one. They're going to contain everything you need, from the basic chords to the more advanced chords and the head itself. All in tab and notation, Guitar Pro and PDF formats. And as usual, you can get hold of all of that stuff by checking out the links in the description. So without any further ado, let's get into things. So we're going to play this in its original key of C, and we're starting on the 1 chord. We're going to opt for a C6. And like I say, we'll start with some basic options and then we'll build from there. So this would be a C6 three-note voicing, root, 6th and 3rd, with the A string dead, and of course the top 2 strings dead also. All the way throughout, we've got to really make sure that we're muting the unwanted strings so we can do the proper authentic swing strumming style. So that's 2 bars of C6, and then we need 2 bars of E7. So we can just grab this 3-note voicing here off the A string, and that would be fine, just 2 bars of E7. But we'll immediately throw a bit of movement in straight off the bat, and we'll go E7, B minor 7, back to the E7. Now we can look at that through the lens of the most common jazz progression out there, the 2-5. So if E7 is 5, which we can assume it's functioning as because it's a dominant chord, the B minor 7 would be the 2 in that world, which would be a 2 and a 5 in the key of A. So E7, B minor 7 to the E7. We can always throw that 2 in anywhere we like just to add that sense of movement. Then we do go to the A chord, but it's going to be an A7 chord, and we have 2 bars there. For the time being, I've chosen just to stay on that A7 for the full 2 bars, but you could feel free to do exactly what we just did with the E7. Again, just to clarify the thinking there, you've got to be able to see any dominant chord as functioning as the 5 and be thinking, okay, if that's the 5, in the world where that's 5, what would the 2 be to make it a 2-5? For example, the A7, in the world where A7 is 5, that's the world of the key of D, E minor 7 would be the 2. So that E minor 7, we can feel free to chuck it in anytime we need the A7, just to add a bit of movement. And like I say, we'll put a pin in that and do that later on. For now, we're just going to hold down on the A7 for 2 bars. And then we need a D minor 7. So that A7, functioning as 5, is resolving where you'd expect, D. D minor 7 in this case. 3-note voicing off the A string. 2 bars there. And that's the A section done. So that's the first 8 bars. That sounds something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. C6. E7. B minor 7 to E7. A7. D minor 7. Then for the B section, we go back to E7, again for 2 bars, and we'll just hunker down there. We won't bother chucking the 2 in. So we'll just go E7, then resolve it to A minor 7. So of course that's a 5-1 in A minor. We do 2 bars on the A minor as well. To the D7, also for 2 bars. Then the G7 for 2 bars. Let's just go over a couple of points there, and then we'll add a nice little run in on that G7. So the A minor 7 could also be seen as the 2 in another 2-5, this time in the key of G, right? So that would be A minor 7 to D7, taking you to G, but that's a G7. So now that's functioning as 5. That's going to want to resolve to C. And instead of just hunkering down there for 2 bars, we could do one of these runs to resolve us back to C6. So that little run up, G7 3-note voicing. This is a D minor 7 with the 5th in the bass, so D minor 7 over A. And then you've got a B flat diminished, and then a G major triad first inversion. So we're really going from one form of a G7 to another type of G7, but without the flat 7. So this little run up, very common, resolving back to C. Now we have the A section again, and we could literally just play the same thing we played for the opening 8 bars. That would be absolutely fine. But as always, I like to put some variations in, so you'll see that I get a bit more playful with inserting that 2 chord in on the 5s to add the movement. So C6, straight to the B minor 7, then the E7. Then A7, we're going to bring in that E minor 7 we spoke about, then the D minor 7. And then we have the C section. This contains a movement that I've featured quite heavily in some recent videos, so do check out my plagal cadence video if you've not seen it yet. This is the 4 minor to 1 sound. We start with the 4, F to 4 minor, F minor, and then to C. Now we've got a lot of options there. Also check out my spread triads and 3-note voicings video. I'll link to that in the description too. It's full of these examples. So F major, F minor, F minor 6 with a chromatic climb up along the G string to the 3rd of the C chord, where I've landed in this spread C major triad. Beautiful sounding, right? 4, 4 minor to the 1, and then chromatically walking down to the A7. And then maybe a bit more of that 2-5 kind of movement. E minor 7 to A7. And then we need a 2-5-1. So we go D minor 7, G7, and then the 1, we'll go C6-9 here. So for the first time in the whole thing, we've used something that isn't just a 3-note voicing. This is a C6-9 rooted on the A string. Root, 3rd, 6th, 9th. 2 beats, and then back to 3-note voicings. This time a E flat diminished, which I'm really thinking of as C diminished. So I'm thinking this is a 1 to a 1 diminished, that being an inversion of that 1 diminished. Then D minor 7 is the 2, G7 is the 5. And then we could resolve to any kind of C chord if we want to finish, maybe this Django style C6, or back to the beginning of the song if you want to go around the whole thing again. Okay, so let's do this properly. I'm going to play through the whole thing along with a metronome. You know, I'm always banging on about that. I'm putting it on beats 2 and 4, the typical jazz way of doing things. And it does really helps you feel where the swing is and how to emphasize those important 2nd and 4th beats. I'm going to do it slightly slower than the speed I've got on the sheet. I'm going to go 150. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So of course it's very important that you learn those basic changes off by heart, because that's going to fall in line with the kind of framework you're going to think about when you play lead over this stuff. So do get that down memorized. But now let's take a look at the classic chords version of this, which is where I've just simply thrown in a lot more movement, some bigger voicings and some substitutions. Okay, so C6. We've expanded it by 1 note. We've added the 5th on top on the B string 8th fret. Now we go to the E7. Again, we've simply added 1 note, the B string 5th fret. Now for that little 2-5 we did, the B minor 7 back to the E7. Again, we're going to include the B string 6th fret to make this a B minor 7 flat 5 back to the E7. And then we're going to get into some really interesting movement on the A7 here. Really helps if you can use your thumb for this, although there are workarounds if not. Just got to be inventive. A7, and again, all we've done is we've expanded our 3-note voicing by adding something on the B string. Just the 5th again, very innocuous. And then we do this little climb, where now I'm back to just 3 notes. The root, the flat 7, that's stayed, but I've climbed the major 3rd up a semitone, so it becomes the 4th. And then we're going to keep that chromaticism going, but move it to the B string. Easy to do that without the thumb, but I keep my thumb in that position for efficiency's sake. So that's the root, the flat 7, the 3rd, and the flat 5, A7 flat 5, and then you're back to a full A7 again. So we've just followed chromatically that little melody line. Now Now next, instead of just doing 2 bars of D minor 7 again, we're going to look at another way of adding movement to chord progressions. This time we're going to look at that D minor 7 as if it's the 1 chord, and think of going from that to its 5, A7 and back. Except we're going to go D minor 7 to A7 flat 9, courtesy of this diminished chord, C sharp diminished 7th, which, if we think about that in the context of A7, the 3rd, the flat 7, the flat 9, and the 5th. All it would take to make this just a plain A7 is to drop the flat 9 back, a semitone. If you've not seen my diminished chords video and how to apply them, do watch it. I'll link that in the description. That tells you everything you need to know about that relationship. So that started with this great voicing for D minor 7, then A7 flat 9, and then another voicing for D minor 7. This stuff is what happens instinctively after a while. You know, your ear wants to connect the dots. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking about this sound. That's why it's so good to have so many options available to you. Then the B section comes along and we're back to our E7. We're going to add some interesting movement to get us to that A minor chord. E7 with a bit of alternating bass. A bit of a rhythmic change here. Open E string, E7 sharp 9, E7 flat 9. All of that is based off that 3-note voicing that we started with, and we're just experimenting with what we can add on the B string, and then resolving to A minor. And then we're going to use one of those classic line cliche runs over the A minor chord. So that would be A minor to A minor major 7 to A minor 7 to A minor 6. This is something I've spoken about at length in other videos, where you're keeping the root moving in semitones until you reach the 6th, chromatically descending there from the root to the 7 to the flat 7 to the 6, but keeping the rest of the chord intact around it. Now we're going to pretty much do that, but for the A minor 6 we're going to come up from underneath, and then that's going to end up landing on beat 1 of D7, where that is our D7 chord, right? But with the 5th in the bass. This is a trick I learned from Matt Munisteri. Always a great way of playing a 2-5. A minor sharp 5 to D7 with the 5th in the bass. 2, 5 in the key of G. Now we could hunker down on D7 for 2 bars here. Could always add some bass movement. Or you can insert that 2 chord again, as we spoke about. If this is 5, why not chuck an A minor in and then back to the D7? Look at that, you can keep most of the chord the same. The little finger and the first finger don't move. You just pivot around and you get A minor 11 and D7. Effortless. And then where we would typically have just 2 bars of G7, we're going to add some movement in. G9, rootless. So this looks like a B minor 7 flat 5, but it's a G9, as we know. Again, as I've covered in many videos, this is a rootless G9 chord. Imagine the root down here on the 3rd fret of the low E string. And then again, like we've done on previous chords, we're going to put some movement in by inserting the 2. And remember, this is not the 2 of G. The G7 is functioning as 5. So that means we're actually in the key of C for this moment. So what's the 2 in the key of C? D minor 7. We're going to play this 3rd inversion, D minor 7. This is why it's so important to know your inversions. Flat 7 in the bass. And then G7, 2nd inversion. So G9 rootless, D minor 7, back to G7, and then G augmented, resolving to a 1st inversion C. Really cool. Now that C chord is going to kickstart the A section, again, the 2nd A section. And we start with this, but then I'm putting in a bit of sidestepping to get to a C6. Because I don't want to hold on to this for too long, because we want to really hear the C in the bass to give it that tonic feel. And I feel like having the E in the bass could be too distracting if you held it down there for too long. So we're going to do 2 beats there, then a B6 to a C6, 3-note voicing, bit of sidestepping. And then we're going to imagine C6 here, but again, sidestep into it from a semitone below. So B6 to C6, B6 to C6, and then onto the top strings, B6 to C6. One of the easiest ways to add movement, something that's very common in Western swing. Sounds great, and it's super simple. Just visualize this C6, which I'm not really even thinking of the root, to be fair. I'm just thinking 5th, root, 3rd, 6th, and then the top 4 strings of a C6, and just get comfortable sidestepping your way in to these chords. Then where that E7 was, again we're going to put the 2 chord in, B minor 7 flat 5 to E7, and then tritone sub the bass note. E7, swap the E down for a B flat, keep everything else where it was. You have to reshuffle your fingers to do that, of course. E7, B7 with a flat 5, fancy stuff with very little effort. Just alternating that bass, Django style. And then A7. Now for the A7 we're going to use that same run that we used on the G7 in our simple changes. That's A7, then the 2 chord, E minor 7. Again, that's the 2 in the world where A7 is 5. So we're talking about the world of D major or D minor. E minor 7 is 2, A7 is 5. So again, it's all about being able to orient your thinking correctly and think of dominant chords as functioning as 5, and then knowing where everything is around that. A7, E minor 7, C diminished to A major, first inversion. And then resolve to D minor, spread triad, root 5th, flat 3rd, back to the A7, back to the D minor. Again, adding a bit of that movement, thinking of this as 1, A7 is 5, D minor is 1. And then we have the C section where we had the 4 chord, then the 4 minor, and all that good stuff. So we're looking for some kind of F. Now this time we're going to play F6, rooted on the A string, so that's our 4 chord. Now to get to the 4 minor, the fingers don't have to leave the strings even, you just have to flatten 2 notes. Flatten the 3rd a semitone to make it a minor chord, and flatten the root to a major 7th to make it a spicy F minor 6 with a major 7th. This is one of those chords from your F melodic minor scale. Beautiful. Now this is where in our original changes we would then resolve back to the 1, so some kind of C chord, but we're going to substitute that 1 for the 3, which is very common in jazz. Again, something I've spoken about a lot. Check out my turnarounds video if you've not seen it. So we're looking for some kind of E minor 7th chord here. We'll go for this voicing, the one we used for the D minor 7 previously. E minor 7 is taking the place of the C major chord here. So you got 4, 4 minor, 3, to A7. But instead of going straight to A7, I'm just going to put in a little side step from above. So E minor 7, B flat 7 to A7. Very common. Now just like before, we need to finish this progression off with a 2-5-1 in the key of C. So we're going to go for this D minor 7 again, and then alternate the bass to the 5th, and then go chromatically down a semitone. And again, all your other fingers can stay on all the same strings and just narrow the shape. You've got G13 with a flat 9 in the bass, the A flat, pretty spicy. And then take that 13 away, making this simply a G7 with a flat 9 in the bass, and then resolve to C6 off the A string. Now you could just finish there on that C6, or if you want to go around the whole thing again, you need some kind of turnaround here. So just insert some kind of 1-6-2-5 turnaround. Again, check out my turnarounds video if you've not seen it, because that goes through all of the permutations and ways we can evolve that progression. But the example I'm going to go with here, C6, then instead of playing A7, we're going to go for a tritone sub of A7, which is an E flat 9 in this case, then a D minor 9, and then instead of G7, again a tritone sub of it, D flat 9, and then finish on C6 9, or go back to the top of the song again there. So just to clarify, the turnaround here, 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. And that would be the start of the song again, back to the top of the A section. So again, just like with the simple changes, I'm going to play through those now at 150 BPM with the metronome ticking on beats 2 and 4. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, just before we get into learning the head, let me just show you a nice couple of options for intros. So as far as intros go, you can just simply use that same turnaround from the end there. Any kind of 1-6-2-5 flavored turnaround is a good way of kicking something like this off. And you want to have a lot of options armed and ready to go. On this occasion, I'm going to go with one of the classics. I think this is a very important one that everyone learns. This is a C major, first inversion. So we're starting on the 1 chord. This is off the A string 7th fret, skip the D string, 5th fret of the G, 8th fret of the B. So this is a C major triad. And then stay on all 3 of these same strings and just move the bottom and top notes down a semitone each while the middle note stays. Now you've got a C diminished or an E flat diminished. This would be a 1 diminished. And then D minor 7, again, same 3 strings. Root, flat 7, flat 3, and then G7 by simply moving the middle note down a semitone. Very simple. If you think about the pattern there, the bottom and top notes move down a semitone, middle note stays the same. Again, bottom and top notes move down a semitone, middle note stays the same. Now this time for the 5 chord, the middle note moves a semitone, bottom and top notes stay the same. 1-6-2-5. Nice way to kick things off. Now this time I'm going to play through kind of using a mixture of those 2 different chord profiles, the basic ones and the more complicated ones. I'm just going to piece things together as I go and as I feel it, but I'm going to do this at the full tempo of 165, and I'm also going to put an intro and an ending on it, and we'll talk about the ending afterwards. And I'm going to be recording it in my looper at the same time. This is going to be our backing track for learning the head. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Turnaround, second time through, more movement. Okay, so that's all in the looper. Now, just a quick mention about the ending there. Obviously, you'd go around more times than I did. You'd typically do at least 4 times round to give the chance to get the head played, then a couple of solos, then close out with the head again. But for the sake of brevity, that was just one run through. Now, at the end, when you do decide to finish, in bars 29 and 30, you've got that 2-5. the D minor 7 to the G7. Now instead of resolving that in bar 31 to C, move that 2-5 up a whole tone, E minor 7, A7, and then back again, D minor 7, a stop on the G7, and then I played this C6, 9 with a heavy bass note in there as well, the 5th, the root, the 3rd, the 6th and a 9, and I played one of these sorts of count bassy rhythms, 1 and 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 1 and 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and. So final time round, bars 29 onwards would sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 5, up a whole tone, 2, 5, back down, 2, 5, 2, 3, 4, 1. Okay, so we're not going to spend too much time breaking down the head of the tune in terms of the melody itself because it's quite simple and it'll all be included on the lesson materials. But do make sure that you're trying to spot triads when you can because this is very heavily triad based. So I'm going to set you the challenge of I'm going to play through this over my looper part and I want to see if you can spot the triads. Okay, here we go. I'll do a little intro as well. Variation. Okay, like I say, I won't break that down in detail. It's all written out on the sheets, and I think it would do you well to try and spot those triads. C major, E major, A7, D minor, E7 again. Lots of these chromatic walk downs from the root to the flat 7. E major, A minor 7, D7. Be thinking chord by chord, G7 or G augmented. And then the ending. Count bass, the ending, walking up chromatically on the B string from the 5th fret all the way to the 8th while maintaining that C root on top. And then I finished on a fat C6 voicing, 5th root, 3rd, 6th. Okay, so there's an overview of the tune All of Me, a deep dive into a couple of levels of chord changes as well as learning the head. I recommend getting all of that down and memorized and loopable. And in the future, we'll revisit and look at how to play lead and solo over these changes. Gear-wise, this is my 1958 ES175, and I'm plugged straight into my 1964 Princeton Reverb. I have the reverb on just a tiny bit, but the EQ is fairly flat. I have treble and bass at about 4. This is strung with 12 gauge flat wound tomastic strings, and it's set up really nicely with a sort of medium to low action. Pick wise, I'm using a Blue Chips pick, STP 45. This is a great pick, but I'm equally happy with just simple Dunlop picks like the H3s. I really like them. So there's no point in spending a lot of money on your plectrum. You know, these were things that I was given many years ago and I've held on to somehow. Okay, so thanks for joining me, guys. Please do hit the like button. Please comment. All makes a huge difference. And make sure you're subscribed as well, of course. And also check out my Patreon if you want to get hold of the lesson materials. I'd really appreciate it. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Take care.